So in today's video, I'm going to be walking you through the step-by-step process for creating what is the most important page that you'll ever build for your directory business. Let's get into it. Hey friends, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I am going to be showing you how to build arguably the most important page for your directory, your listing page. Now, why is the listing page so much more important than all of the other sites? That is because in majority of cases, when you are looking at different directory sites or marketplaces, all of the different sub pages that you'll find are basically variations of the same page. And so what that means is that after you've created the first version of your listing page, you'll be able to replicate it over and over again, apply filters to your listings, and then create SEO optimized landing pages targeting certain keywords. Now, I have built a gazillion of these sites, and so in today's video, I've decided to actually break down my exact process step by step. So if you are someone that has never ever built a website before, you've never ever even thought about building a directory site, then this video is going to take you through the exact step by step process. I'm going to take you through all of the different mouse clicks. I'm going to explain my thinking behind each step of the process. And basically, if you have been thinking about building a directory, this is the video that will help you get the first version of your site ready. Now, here's what we're going to be covering. So the first thing that we're going to cover is how to start a new Webflow project. I'm going to show you how you can get the Relume starter project with its style guide so that you can start adding some of your brand styles and fonts to your project. As soon as that is done, we're then going to jump into Relume and we're going to go and search for some components that we can then use on our listing page. As soon as we've found components that we want to work with, we'll then jump into Webflow and we'll start to assemble the high level structure of our page. So that includes a header and navigation section, and of course our listing section with search and filtering. I'm also going to be breaking down how you can add dynamic content to your listing page by using the Webflow CMS, and that will then tie into how we use Airtable to manage all of our data, and how we use a tool like Whalesync to sync our data from Airtable to Webflow. And then once all of our information is inside of our Webflow project, I'm also going to dive into how you can set up search and filtering with Finsweet Attributes. I also want to make a quick shout out to the sponsor of this video, Whalesync. Whalesync is a two-way syncing tool that allows you to connect platforms like Airtable and Webflow to each other. I actually use Whalesync a lot, including in this video today, so I'll be talking more about how Whalesync works later. Now, just a quick little note before we dive into this video. You can already tell from the actual length of the video that it's going to be quite a long one. And that is because I really go in depth and I walk through every single step of the process that I go through when I build these types of sites. Now, a question that I've been getting a lot recently in some of my YouTube videos is if it's really necessary to use all of the different tools that I am using to build out these types of sites. And the short answer is no. You can pretty much get away with just using Webflow, and you could use something like Finsweet Attributes for free. However, the tools that I use because they save me a huge amount of time. So if you're currently at a stage where you don't really want to invest any money in tools like Relume or even Airtable or whatever else is out there, then just focus on the Webflow portion of it first, try to get traction with it, and then you can add more and more of these tools over time. With that being said, we have got quite a bit to cover, so I'd recommend watching this in stages, taking notes, and then just replicating what it is that I'm doing. If you have any questions along the way, please let me know in the comments down below. I will answer most of the questions in the blog version of this video that I'll also be linking down below. With all of that being said, let's get into it. Okay, so the first step in the process is to clone the Relume style guide. So I'll leave a link to this particular page down below, but the way it works is you just go in here, you click on clone in Webflow. That will then bring up a window where you can create a site and add it to your dashboard. Usually you just go ahead, click on it, give it a name, create site, and that will then create a new project for you. Now this project will look a little bit like this. You're gonna have your home page, which has this placeholder section in it, and then you'll also have your style guide. Now the reason why we start with the Relume style guide is simply because when we start importing components from Relume, it will automatically apply the styles that we have set in our style guide to those imported components. So my first recommendation after setting this up is to just go through all of the different parts of your style guide and update the fonts and update everything else that you need to change. So now that I've updated my fonts and I've added some colors to my style sheet, now we need to move on to one more part that is very crucial before we start importing our Relume components, and that is to install the Relume Chrome extension. Now, what this Chrome extension will do is it will allow you to enable something called class sync. And essentially what that means is that if we go and look at our existing project, we already have a bunch of elements with defined class names. For example, we've got this element that has a class name of heading style 1. And then when we jump into Relume and we start importing components, it's actually going to look at this particular style associated with this class and automatically apply it to those elements. So what you're going to need to do is just add the Chrome extension. Once it's added, refresh your Webflow browser and you should see this extension here. And then all you need to do is click on Class Sync and just make sure it's turned on. By having the Chrome extension installed as well, you'll also be able to access all of the Relume components directly from inside of Webflow, which means you won't need to switch back and forth. With all of that being set up, we're now ready to go ahead and build our listing page. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a new page. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the pages icon over here, and then I'm just going to create a new page. So in order for me to create the page, I need to give the page a name. I'm going to call it Find a Race. And then all I need to do is click on Create. Now we're going to work on updating some of the SEO settings later on, but for now we're going to be starting off with this blank canvas. Now, in case you are brand new to building sites in Webflow or maybe even using Relume components, one of the things that we're going to need to do whenever we start a new page is to add the client first page structure. Now, this might sound like an earful for anyone brand new to this. All you need to do is inside of the component library, just type in page structure, and at the very, very bottom of the list, you'll find an UI element called page structure. And all you need to do is copy it. Once it's copied, head over to the navigator, and with the body selected, just go ahead and paste it with Command V or whatever it is that you Windows people do. So in here, what you'll see now is the high level structure of every page. So at the very top, we'll have a page wrapper that will contain all of the elements that we'll be adding to this page. Then we have a custom HTML embed, which will have some custom styles that override certain native Webflow settings. And then we have the main wrapper that is going to contain all of the main sections on this page. Now, before we move on to importing our components, there are a few little things that we're going to need to do. First of all, we will want to add our global styles components. So in order for you to access your global styles component, we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on the components icon. Then we're just going to go ahead and drag our global styles component embed into that section, and then we'll go ahead and remove the duplicate of it. Now, the reason why we want to use this component is because as we're making changes to our global styles and updating that embed, it will automatically apply to all of the other pages without you actually having to manually update every single embed yourself. Now, the next thing that we're going to need to do before we can really get started is also remove this placeholder section here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete it, and that will now leave us with three elements: the page wrapper, the global styles, and the main wrapper. Now, the main wrapper is where we're going to start dropping in our components. So what I recommend doing, if you've never used Relume before, is to actually head over to the Relume library and to have a little bit of a browse through all of their different components. Now, especially when it comes to building marketing websites, Relume has some really awesome components that you can use. For example, if you go and have a look in the drop-down, you'll see you've got nav bars, footers, headers, all those types of things. Now, when I'm thinking about building a listing page, I want to really think about what the main components are that I'm going to need. Now, the first component that I'm going to need is a header section. So basically an introduction to that page where I can add my H1 tags for SEO purposes, add a quick little description what this page is about, and then if I also want, I can add a little bit of a call to action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by adding the header 44 section to my project. So we're going to return to Webflow. We're going to select the main wrapper, and then we're going to click on our Relume Chrome extension. And inside of the component library, we're going to search for the component header 44. Now, you can see here a preview of all of the different components. All we're going to do now is click on copy. And once you see that it has copied this component, what we're going to do is we're going to head back to the navigator, and we're simply going to click on Command V to paste our component. And just like that, you can see how our Relume component has automatically been added to this page. Now, just want to quickly show you one of the main advantages of Relume is that everything is mobile responsive, so font sizes change as you go through different devices, and this is something that will just save you tons and tons of time. Now, let's move on to the next part. Now, every listing page is going to have a filter section. Now, Relume has a lot of different filter sections that you can use. Simply look into the e-commerce section under category filters. And in here, you'll see a whole bunch of different options and layouts that you can use. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to jump back into my project. I'm going to make sure that my main wrapper is selected. And then I'm going to click on my Relume Chrome extension, and I am going to look for filters. Now, I would recommend doing research into how potentially competitor sites are using filters so that you can kind of get a little bit of an idea of whether or not you want to have it on the side or you want to have it on the top. But ultimately, what I'm going to go with is filters 2, which is just going to sit on the site. So I'm going to click on copy. Once again, I'm going to wait until I can see that the element has been copied. Then I'm going to click into my main wrapper, and then I'm going to paste it. And just like that, you can see that something new has been pasted. Now, quick little heads up, sometimes when you paste Relume components, it's also going to add some custom instructions. We can just simply delete that section. Another thing that's important to keep in mind is sometimes you'll also have certain sections that are part of a particular component that you don't really need. For example, you've got this heading section here that I don't really need simply because I already have a header for this page. So if you don't need a certain section, just go ahead, have a look at where that section is, and then just simply hit the delete button in order to remove it. Now, this already is starting to look a little bit better, but obviously one big part that is missing is our feed section. So this is where all of our listings are going to be sitting. Now, depending on the type of project that you're working on, you'll maybe want to have cards, you'll maybe want to have a stacked list, and really Relume does have you covered here. So what I'd recommend doing is clicking on the application UI and then scrolling down to where it says stacked lists, and in here you'll be able to see a whole bunch of different options of, list type listings, but then you also have the grid lists where you can see something that you typically see with talent directories or product directories. So if you want to have a closer look at it, just click on the preview icon and you'll kind of get an idea of how it all looks, and that is then how you can basically decide what you'll want to add. Now, because I'm going to be listing events, I'm actually also going to have a quick little look in the events section. And I can see that there are a whole bunch of components that are particularly suited to what I'm going to be adding on my listing page. So after checking all of these different options out, I've decided that this is the layout that I'm after. It kind of suits the data that I have, and also it will give me enough flexibility to account for use cases where I might not have an image. Now, one thing that I do want to say is that at the moment, I want to add the listing cards from that section in here, but if I were to copy the entire component, I would also be copying everything else over. So instead of copying it over from the Relume Chrome extension, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to click on the copy UI elements part from inside of Relume, and I'm actually just going to hover over the section with all of the cards. And so now I'm going to simply select this section here, and then from here I'm just going to simply jump back into into my project, and I am going to paste my copied component into the filters to feed. Because I have pasted it into the filters to feed, it will automatically add that component to the very bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to move it up, and I'm then going to replace the content feed. So we're just going to delete that. And so just like that, we already have a rough outline of what our listing page could look like. Now, at this stage, what I will do is start off by adding any remaining sections that I need, and then I'll also start adding copy. So that's what I'm going to do next. Because I don't want you to sit through the entire thing, I'm just going to pause the video here, and then I'm going to show you what I did. Okay, so what I've done is I've added a nav bar, and I've also added a footer, and then I also added this navigation section here that will help people who visit this site find more listing specific pages. So I've got different categories for my different locations, and then I also have a filter by race type. And so whenever they click into one of these cards, it will then take them to a page that filters out only location specific events or race type specific events. And that will allow you to actually optimize these listing pages by locations, and all of the keyword research that you have done should hopefully have kind of dictated what your strategy here will look like. Now it's time to really look at the listing section here, because this here is really where your bread and butter is when it comes to creating a really good user experience and just adding value to people who are visiting your site. Now, there are two key parts that we're going to need to deal with. Part number one is we're going to need to set up, all of the filters that we're going to want to use. And then the second part is going to be to set up all of the cards and making sure that all of the information that we have on here fits with what we need to tell our customers. So I typically like to start off with the cards, simply because it makes it a lot easier for me to then basically identify, what information I'm going to need in my filters in order to, set up the search and filtering functionality later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now go through the process of taking one of these cards and essentially replacing it with placeholder content. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to find an image, and I've already uploaded a few just to save us a little bit of time. And then from here, what we're going to do is we're going to basically add information about our event. So in this section here, I would probably add some information about what the name of the race is. So it would be like the Manhattan 5K running race. Then down here, we'll have our date field that will look like that. And then we'll also have a location. And what we'll say is, Central Park, New York City. And when you're filling this out, what I recommend doing is experimenting with different lengths of content so that you can see how different lengths of content actually affect your designs. And so in this case, I can see that they start to squeeze together. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change I'm going to change it from being kind of aligned like the way it is now to just being stacked. So if it exceeds a certain length, it will automatically stack it. Then the next part here is that I don't want to have a paragraph for now, but just keep in mind that whatever changes you implement now can be changed later on. And maybe just for the sake of simplicity, I'm also going to remove this tag for now. And so the first kind of high-level version of my card will look a little bit like this. Now, I'm also going to apply my font, and so I'm just going to use one of the class names that I've got set up in my style sheet. So there we go. Maybe we'll make it an F5 style. There we go. And then the last thing that I want to change is just the button. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to apply my default button style, and just like that, we are looking a lot better. So with that in mind, this has already started to give me an indicator with the type of information that I'm going to need to collect inside of the Webflow, or set up inside of the Webflow CMS, so that I can turn this static card into dynamic content. So what I'm going to do next, and this is something that I'll do before I set up all of the filters, is I'm going to go and create the Webflow CMS for my individual races so I can start creating dynamic content that will then ultimately lead to me deciding what filters I need. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to head to the CMS of our Webflow project and we're going to create a new collection. So at the moment it's empty. I'm going to create a new one and I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to call this the race detail section. So in here, I'm basically going to be storing all of the details related to a particular race, but I'll also be storing the information that will be displayed in the preview card. So we've got our collection list set up. Now we need to start adding our fields. And so what I recommend doing is basically going through your card preview, and let's go ahead, save it, and having a think about what information you need to collect. So far I can see 5 key fields that we're going to need. Number 1, our image. Number 2, the name of the race. Number 3, the date label of the event. Number 4, the location label of the event. And then we also have a button, so a URL where we're going to send someone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to my CMS, and then I'm going to click on the settings for this collection item, and I'm going to start adding the information. So the first thing that I'm going to add is a single line text for my card title. So this will be the event title, card title. Depending on how unique your card setup is, you might want to be more specific, but you could potentially also just say event title. So I'm just going to go ahead, say card title. Then I'm also going to have card date field. So that is the date field that is displayed. And then I also have the card location. And again, if you want to reuse this outside of the card, you're perfectly fine to just go ahead and instead of calling it card location, just calling it location. And then we have an image field. So I'm going to click on image and I'm going to call this card thumbnail. And then finally, the other last field that we're going to have is a URL field, which I'm going to call the sign up URL or the website URL. At the moment, that is all we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to save my collection. And now from here, what I'm able to do is I'm able to start adding some race details. So what are we going to add? The first thing that I'm going to add is just a placeholder event. So let me quickly have a look. Let's just call it the TCS New York City Marathon, and we're gonna say it's on, I think it's on November 1st, so we'll just go November 1st 2025, and I believe it starts in Brooklyn, New York City. And then we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna give this a sign up URL, so we're gonna call this we'll just go HTTPS, and then we'll go just my website for now. So let's just go ahead, add that in here. I also need to add a name. So we're going to go and add that in there. And then I'm going to simply find, actually, let's just find an image. We'll go downloads. I'm pretty sure I got an image yesterday. I'm just going to put a placeholder image in there for now. And then we're going to go ahead and click on the create button. So we're going to create it. Then we're going to return back to our Webflow project. And what we want to do next is we want to replace this static content here with dynamic content now. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to head over to the Add Elements tab. And in here, I'm going to grab a collection list and I'm simply going to click on it. Now what this will do is it will drop it into the section that I've got selected. But where I actually want it to be is inside of the filters to feed. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to drag this up above the static collection list wrapper, and it looks a little bit like this. Now, in order for us to pull information from that CMS collection in, what we're going to need to do first is we're going to need to connect our collection. So I'm going to click on it, and then I'm going to say, hey, what is the actual CMS collection that we're working with here? And because we only have one, I'm going to select race details. And what you'll see now is that it automatically pulls in the one collection item that it can currently find. So from here, what we need to do is we need to now start populating it with our basically with our cards. And so luckily, because we already created the static version of our card, we can actually just take what we've already designed, so our event for item card, and just drop it straight into our collection item like this. Okay? Because now that it sits inside of this collection item, what we can actually do is we can actually pull information from our Webflow CMS and map it in here. So if, for example, I want to use the image inside of the Webflow CMS, all I need to do is click on the card thumbnail and it will automatically populate it with that information. If I want to update the race title with the name of the event, then I'll just go ahead, select card title, and it does the trick. Same with date. We're going to jump in here. We're going to select the card date field. And then same with the location. We're just going to go in here and we're going to add our location. And then, why did I say New Zealand? All good. Then finally, we are also going to add a link to this particular button. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our URL from our CMS, and we're simply going to connect our sign up URL to it. Now that we have this, we are basically pulling in dynamic data from our CMS. So what is the next step in this? So I actually want to change this to New York City. So the next step in all of this is for you to basically start populating your Webflow CMS with content. Okay, so what I recommend doing is just jumping in here and just populating it with maybe 3 or 4 different events or listings. Okay, so I've added 2 more events, and as you can see, some of the formatting is not quite what we want it to be. So the reason for that is that our collection list that we added doesn't actually have any styling applied to it. Now you can definitely go ahead and just add your own styling to it. However, we've actually already styled our collection list when we set up our placeholder. So we've got a class here of event for list, which has a gap of 2 rem. So ultimately, if we wanted to just speed up this process, we could actually just apply that class name directly to our collection list, and then it will automatically update all the information as needed. Now that we have dynamic content, we can actually start removing our static placeholder text, and just like that, we already have something that somewhat resembles a listing page. Now, the next step in all of this is going to be to figure out how we're going to allow our customers to actually filter different races, and that's what we're going to look into next. Now, this part here is crucial, so I will definitely take my time to have a little bit of a think about what the key filters are that you want to add. Now, just to give you a little bit of an understanding of, how this particular Relume component is structured, you've got groups of different filters. So if we just click into one of the filters, you'll see that in here we've got a category list. So these are just straight links to different pages. This doesn't actually filter, it just redirects you somewhere. And then below that, we've got a filter group list. So it's basically a list of different groups of filters. So inside of Webflow, there are a few different options. You've got checkboxes, you've got radio icons, you've got different types of checkboxes and radio buttons. You've got a search bar, you've got drop downs, you've got scaling or range sliders that you can use, and then you also have toggles that you can use as well. So typically how I approach it is I like to think about what are the main filters that I want to add. Typically, you'll get a good idea of what it is that competitors are doing and how they're allowing customers to filter. And like I said, really what we're aiming for is just like a better experience compared to what some of our competitors are doing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by removing the different types of filters that I don't need. And the first group is the category list. Now, I don't need any of these lists because I'm simply going to allow people to reach sub-pages by clicking on one of these links here. And then we're going to go through all of the different filters. Now, the first one that I know I'm going to need is the search bar. So I want to allow people to basically type in, a name of a location or the name of, a race, and I want that to basically start the filtering process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my search filter group to the very top, and then I'm just going to simply update it here by just saying search. Now, some sub filters that I might want to add, and again, this is going to depend on what it is that you're trying to build, is, for example, something like race type. So in here, I'll add something like 5 kilometer, 10 kilometers, and then we'll add a half marathon, and then we'll have a marathon, just like that. So I can remove that last one. Then the next filter that I might want to add is, for example, the, what else could we add potentially? Maybe we'll just say race type. Okay, so the different types of races. So we'll have all races that you can see here. Then we have road races. So I'm going to add road. Then I am going to update this filter with trail. Then we're going to have a different category for fun run. And then we are also going to need a category for track runs. And then we'll have team and relay. So I'm just going to go ahead, select that filter and replace that with team relay. Now, depending on what it is that you're building, you know, it can be things like pricing or maybe feedback, that kind of stuff that has been collected. So it's really up to you. Now, I'm going to remove this section here. We're just going to go ahead, delete it, delete the next one. Now, I will keep the drop down section and I'm going to make this season so that people can kind of filter by different seasons. So I'm going to go in here and I'm just going to give this particular select field a name of season. And then I am going to go through the process of actually adding the different seasons. So we'll start off with winter. So I'm just going to paste that in here. So the first thing is putting it in the text value is what the customer will see when they select the drop down. And then you also need to paste the same value on. It doesn't have to be the same, but I'd recommend it being the same. Basically, if you're going to end up sending something like this to Airtable, it's case sensitive. So I actually just recommend it being the same. But the value is really just what Webflow will pass through. It's not necessarily the actual label itself. So I'm going to go through the other two as well, or the other three. We're going to add this, and then we're going to add the next one. And, you know, so far we've probably spent about 20 minutes on this page, maybe 25 minutes. Sometimes when people are just getting into building these sites for the very first time, you can get a little bit nervous about, I don't like, you know, the design of it all. My recommendation is, unless you are a designer, to not worry about the designs yet. Typically, the way I like to approach it is I like to do the rough outline first, and then we chisel in the finer details later on. If you get into you know, trying to kind of perfect things immediately, you'll find yourself struggling to just get anything out. So I just recommend staying focused. So the last one is going to be the Boston qualifier. Now, I'm going to circle back to how we actually apply these filters to these cards at the end of this video. But what we're going to need to do next is we're going to need to get a bit more systematic about how we're going to collect all of the data and get it into the Webflow CMS. And that brings us to today's sponsor, Whalesync. Now, if you watched my video on how to find high quality data for your directory, you'll know that there are so many different places that I actually pull data from, and ultimately it all ends up inside of my Airtable base. Now, the reason why I want to use Airtable is, one, I have a lot more control over, you know, importing data from different sources, formatting things, triggering automations. That's why, even though you can do this directly inside of Webflow, I actually just think that doing it inside of Webflow is not particularly scalable. That's why I move all of this into Airtable. And so an example of how I could potentially use Airtable in a way that I couldn't necessarily use Webflow is, if I, for example, add a date field, I can actually create a label that basically calculates how many days there are until the actual event starts. And then instead of having to calculate this inside of Webflow, I can actually get the information from Airtable and sync it over as is. So it just gives you a lot more flexibility. But that obviously also comes with the challenge of having to get the data into Webflow, and that is where I use Whalesync. Now, Whalesync is an automation tool similar to a tool like Make.com or Zapier or whatever else you may use. Now, the main reason why I enjoy using Whalesync is because it is the simplest one to set up. The way it works is you just go ahead, you connect your Airtable account, you go ahead, you select the base that you're working with, And then you also go ahead and connect your Webflow account in a very similar way. So you go ahead, save your connection, then you jump back into the second app, and the second app is Webflow. And then inside of here, what we do is we once again give our site permission. So I think I call this one YouTube. I just need to double check. Pretty sure that's the name of it. You can see what the name of your project is inside of the site settings. So it's called YouTube Directory Demo. And so now I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to select the YouTube Directory Demo. I'm going to authorize it. And as soon as you have connected these two apps to each other, or connected these two apps to Whalesync, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to set up a syncing between a Webflow collection and an Airtable table. And the way that you do that is you just simply click on Add Table Mappings. And then in here, what you'll be able to do is identify the Webflow collections that you have and the Airtable tables that you have. And you can then map them up to each other so that you know what information in Airtable belongs to what collection inside of Webflow. So in this case, I want to use my race events table. So if we're going to have a look, I've got a table called race events. It's got all of these different options in here. And then in Webflow, my collection is called the, let's have a look what we called it, the race details collection. So what we're going to do is we're going to select our table, which is the race detail selection. And now we're good to go to start creating our table mappings. Now, the way that our table mappings works is that once you connect the two tables to each other, Whalesync will basically have a look at the different fields inside of your collection. And so it's identified name, slug, card detail, all those kind of fields. Then it will also go and have a look at our Airtable base, and it's also here identified name and all these other fields that come with it. And so now, now what it does is it recognizes, oh, we've actually found two fields that match each other. Let's just automatically map them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that, and you'll see that it automatically maps my Airtable name field to my Webflow name field, and my Airtable slug field to my Webflow slug field. So a tip I have for you is if you have not yet set up your Airtable base to basically mirror your Airtable tables to your Webflow CMS collections, and then it will automatically find all of your fields. Now, let's go through all of the different Webflow CMS fields that we've got set up. So the first thing is we've got the card title, and now I can decide what value I want to populate for my card title. So in this case, I might just want to use my race title field. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to select the race title field from inside of my Airtable base. Next, we've got the card date, and so that is the date field. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead, select that. And so all we need to do now is just go ahead and map up all of the different fields to each other. This should be somewhat intuitive simply because you know, they'll mean the same in both Airtable and Webflow. And then finally, we're also going to add a sign up URL. So that's going to be a link. And then I'm also going to add the Webflow status field. So that basically tells me what status a record is in inside of the Webflow CMS. And I have also created the equivalent field inside of Airtable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to map that up to the status field. Now, one thing that is really awesome about Whalesync is that, you know, as you are starting to collect all of your information from all of your different sources, you might be in a situation where you don't actually want to automatically publish it. Okay, and so you can see here I've got a few events in here that are archived. I've got some that are in review. I've got some that are active. And ideally what I want to do is only sync information that is currently active. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and I am going to set a filter that basically says only sync data where the status of the Airtable record and Webflow record is active, just like that. And that gives you a certain degree of control over the kind of, you know, information that can and can't be synced. Okay, so we've got that now. Now what we want to do is prepare our initial sync. So what Whalesync will do now is it will scan our Airtable base, and it will also scan our Webflow CMS collection, and it's going to try and identify how many records can be used. And so it found 19 Airtable records and 3 Webflow records, but 9 of the Airtable records were excluded because their current status is not active, and then it also excluded 3 Webflow CMS items because their status is also not active. Now, if, for example, you did have some active records inside of Webflow, what will happen is it will automatically create those Webflow CMS items inside of your Airtable base, and any records inside of Airtable that don't exist inside of Webflow will automatically get created inside of your Webflow CMS. So with all of that being said, this all looks good. We're going to go ahead, we're going to click on continue. It will give us a little bit of a preview of our sync, and then we're going to click on continue, and then we're going to click on activate sync. So this process here is something that you only need to set up once, but once it's set up, you will be pretty much good to go. Now, I can already see I've got a few errors. Now, this is good because now I can show you how you can identify errors. So if you click on the Issues tab, it will tell you what specifically the issue is. And the main issue that you're typically going to run into when you're doing this for the very first time is that you have not published your site yet. So this will only work if your site has been published. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click on Publish to Selected Domains. Then it's going to basically take our page and it's going to publish it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click on Retry All. And what it will do is take all of the records that have failed and it's going to try and sync them back up again. So now you can kind of see, yep, the syncing process has started, and it will basically make whatever updates are necessary. Now, how does this look inside of the Webflow CMS? So you can now see how it's now added all of these new events from my Airtable base. And if I go ahead and check out my listing page, might have to refresh this. I hope we don't have to, but maybe we do. So I'll just go ahead and refresh this quickly. But here we go. You can see how it's just added all of these different listings for me, and all of this is controlled by the Webflow CMS. Now, here's something that is really awesome about it. So let's just go ahead and republish this page again. Now, if I were, for example, to go and say, change a title of something. So let's change the End of Summer Half Marathon. What I would do is I'd go ahead, I'd find the event in here. So here it is, End of Summer. All I'd need to do is click on End of Winter Half Marathon. And as long as your Whalesync account is active, it will monitor for changes, and then it will automatically update those changes. As you can see here now in real time, there was an update. And then those changes will then automatically, without you needing to refresh anything, be reflected on your Webflow site. And yeah, it basically takes care of itself. So you pretty much don't even need to log back into the Webflow CMS anymore. You can just control everything from directly inside of your Airtable base, and that will make your life a lot easier. So highly recommend Whalesync. Thanks again for sponsoring the video. And if you have any questions about it, please let me know in the comments down below. Now, let's return to the next part of our build. So we've started to really move along with things. I think in the first iteration of this build, when I look at the links, I actually just link it directly to their website. But in a future iteration, once you start building out the race detail page, you can actually just link it to a page that you set up. But next, what we're going to need to do is set up our search and filtering. Now, there's a lot to search and filtering. So what I'm going to do, just to show you how it works at a high level, is show you how you would implement the search functionality. Okay, so search and filtering happens with a tool called Finsweet Attributes. Now, this is free to use and it is awesome. It's super reliable. I've talked about it on this channel a bit. What we're going to use in order to do the search and filtering is the CMS filter attribute. So few things that we're going to need to do. The first step in it is we're going to need to install Finsweet Attributes on our site. And the way that we do that is we go to our project settings and we add the Finsweet script for CMS filtering. So just go to step 1, copy the script, jump back into your Webflow project, go to the custom code section, and then just paste it at the very bottom of your footer code, hit the save button, and then click publish. So now that we've got this installed, there are a few additional things that we're going to need to do. First of all, we're going to need to now tell Finsweet Attributes what the list is that contains all of our listings. And then we also need to tag our cards and our filters so that we can basically determine what filter filters what element inside of our CMS collection. Now, 2 steps involved with this to get started is, first of all, we need to apply a custom attribute to our list. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy the attribute that you'll find in the documentation. We're going to click on our collection list, which is this one here. And then under settings, we're going to go to the custom attribute section, and we're simply going to paste what we just got, and we're just going to add the value of list. Now, when you're using Relume components, it will automatically add your CMS filter elements for you, which is a huge time saver. So you can see here that my filters to form already has an attribute of fs minus CMS filter minus element filters. Now, if you are not using Relume, you'll have to add this yourself to the actual form element. Now, I would recommend just checking out the documentation if you run into any errors, because it will basically explain where things go wrong. Now, the next part is we're going to need to set up our field identifiers. So our field identifiers basically determine what we are filtering different elements by. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this attribute, and I'm now going to head back into Webflow, and I'm going to select different elements in my card. So if I want to allow someone to search by name, what I want to do is I want to add an attribute of fs minus cms filter minus field, and then I'm going to call this title. Then down here, I'm going to say I'll add another one, which I'm going to call date, and then I'm going to add another one, which I'm going to call location. So I've now tagged 3 elements in here. And what I want to do next is I want to now set up the search filter that's associated with this. And so I tag it in a very similar way. So what I do is I say, hey, whenever someone types in something into the search field, I want you to filter by a certain identifier. Now, if I only wanted it to be filtered by the name, then what I'd need to add into the identifier field is the same name of this attribute, which in this case is title. So let's just go ahead and do that. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to replace identifier with title, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to publish my site. So now that I'm on the published version of my site, if I type in something like Cinco, it will automatically look at what titles have Cinco in it, and it will then filter it out by that. Now, if I wanted to, for example, search by, say, location, or let's say the month, and I typed in May, it will only find this one event because it actually has May in the title. But if you want to allow it to also filter out by the date and the location, then what you can do is you can actually replace the CMS filter field identifier with a star, and that basically tells Finsweet that you are basically giving this search permission to search by any of the fields in this particular collection item. So what we're going to do is we're going to republish it, and then we're going to try this again. Okay, so now that I'm on this page, let's go ahead and let's just filter by all events in May, and now you can see that it actually includes all of these events now. So you can really do, be quite flexible with these filters. You'll see that it automatically updates, how many items are showing. You'll see that dynamic filters are being added. And ultimately, just like that, you have managed to set up a listing page. Now, there's obviously still quite a lot that can be done to make improvements to the site. For example, you can make some visual updates, add your branding, make refinements to some of your filters. You can potentially style your cards a little bit better. We'll also need to optimize our our SEO. So the way that we do that is we just jump in here, we add our title tag and our meta descriptions. But with this particular layout here, we've really set the foundation for our listing page. And so when we then start creating, location specific pages or, race type or category specific pages, then what we can actually do is copy this entire page, paste it into those sub pages, and then just apply filters to our list. And that is really what makes using the Webflow CMS and, these types of template pages so incredibly powerful. All right, so that's it. Hopefully this was useful. I tried to cover as much valuable stuff as possible in the hour that we had together. If there are any questions or you're running into any issues with certain types of setups, do please let me know. I'm more than happy to clarify things on my blog. Also, in case you didn't know, there is a playbook that I'm working on called the Local Directory Playbook, which is going to be a multi-part course where I'll walk you through all of this in even more detail. And so if you are thinking about a directory, check out the landing page, join the waitlist. With all of that being said, thank you so much for watching it all the way to the end, and I'll see you back here for the next one. Bye.